It's time for our monthly round table discussion, our round table event. We're going to be discussing Internet regulation. Should we or shouldn't we? First, I'd like to introduce our guests. Our first panelist is Michael Curtis. He joined the U.S. Navy in 1969, where he served for 14 years. He's a combat veteran who, owing to his assignment as a senior communications technician at a variety of communications stations in the U.S. and overseas, has seen the inside workings of the military and the government structure that controls it. If top-secret prototypes of new military technology were on board ship, then Michael knew the workings of the devices, even if top brass didn't. Michael Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brennan. I'm glad to be here. I'm really excited about this event.
Michael, you were the guy who knew everything about anything technical that mattered on ship. That's kind of a daunting job. Could you perhaps entertain us with a really brief story from your naval days about, something that happened with new technology?
Oh, yeah, I could. One of the ships I was on, I can't mention the name, we got a new radar system. And the funny thing about it is the radar officer couldn't seem to understand that it was digital and not analog, and was always trying to get in the back of it and make adjustments, because that's what he used to do, the old one. And it was on and offline pretty regularly for about 2 months. So it was very interesting. The guy in charge just didn't make the mental leap that this was not adjustable anymore. It either worked or it didn't.
That's your segue into the technological generation of digital. All right. Our second panelist is going to take the position in favor of Internet regulation. His name is Art Brodsky. He's the Communications Director of Public Knowledge, a Washington, D.C.-based public interest group working to defend citizens' rights in the emerging digital culture. He's a veteran of Washington telecommunications and Internet journalism and public relations. Art worked for 16 years as a correspondent with Communications Daily. He covered Congress through the passage of the Telecommunications Act, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and other major pieces of legislation. He also covered telephone regulation at the FCC and at state regulatory commissions. He has covered the online industry since before there was an Internet, coming in just after videotext died, but before the World Wide Web. Art was later an editor with Congressional Quarterly, with responsibilities for the daily web coverage of telecom, tech, and other issues. Let's welcome to the show Art Brodsky. Hi, Art.
Hi, Brent. How are you?
Doing just fine. So you were around since before the Internet? Wow. No offense, but some would say that makes you a caveman. You mean
it is what it is,
There really was life before the Internet.
There was, and it was fun.
Yes, I know. I remember, too. I had my old 286 until the power supply died, and I couldn't replace it. So, yeah, I understand that.
286, that's something.
There you go. You spent years working in, around, and with the District of Columbia. Now, very briefly, how would you characterize the changes you've seen in your time there?
They are technological, they're economic, and they're social. I mean, you went from having one monopoly that controlled all the technology in the Bell system to having it broken up, to having it been put back together again. Meanwhile, during the times when they weren't in control, people were able to do innovations like packet switching and cheaper long distance and modems. So it's been a whole jumble of things. Some of them make sense, some of them don't.
What about the overall evaluation when you mix them all together? Plus or minus?
Well, it depends when you start counting. I mean, is it better than when the Bell system was a monopoly and they were able to, say, withhold answering machines because they thought it would be a threat to telephones? Absolutely. Is it as good as it could be? Probably not.
All right. Taking the anti-position on the issue is Seton Motley. He is president of Less Government, an organization dedicated to, well, less government, including protecting the First Amendment from assault by government officials or employees. He is editor-in-chief of StopNetRegulation.org, a center for individual freedom production. Seton is a writer, television and radio commentator, political and policy strategist, lecturer, debater, and activist. Seton Motley, welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. How did you come to be an activist for less government? Was there some catalyst event in your life, or did you just naturally grow up to be that way?
I was born in the D.C. area, and I hated school. When I was 6, it snowed, so I went racing to the radio to see if I could get out of school, listen to my county, Fairfax County, and interspersed with all the school announcements, because it's D.C., were government announcements. And I actually heard the announcement at the age of 6, non-essential government personnel need not come in today. So I was confused, and I went to my mother, who was getting ready to go to work as a graphic artist. I said, "Does your graphic artist shop have non-essential personnel?" She said, "What? No." I said, "What about like IBM? Does IBM have non—" She said, "Why are you asking this?" I said, "Because the government does, and they don't have to come into work today." And I remember thinking, what's worse, that announcement or being the person who hears it and says, "Oh, good, I don't have to go into work today"? Who wants to be that guy? So from very early on, I realized that the vast majority of government is totally dysfunctional, a waste of our time, our money, and our effort. And the government that governs best governs least. So that's why I am a conservative. I don't like.
All right, excellent. Our panelists for today's roundtable discussion on Internet regulation: Michael Curtis, who might be described as a modern-day MacIver. In some ways, our technical resident genius. Art Brodsky, Director of Public Knowledge, and Seton Motley, Editor-in-Chief of StopNetRegulation.org. I'd like to start with you, Michael.
Yes.
To what degree is it possible to control the Internet?
Well, that's like a lot of questions. That's one that's got a lot of horns on it. The basic answer is, depends on how much money you're willing to throw at it, and how much time and how many people.
Well, and I'm asking the question from a standpoint of, since we have to assume that governments have lots of money and lots of desire to use that money to control people, and Internet could be one way to do that, what is actually technologically possible? What can you do? Because people get paranoid, they worry about everything. What actually could be done, given, say, unlimited resources, to control the Internet?
Well, the first level of control is basically forcing people through whatever means to channel their activities through certain filters, probably on a national basis. And, of course, the baseline for that, based on their current track record, would be a taxation format. They'll impose a tax on certain activities, and in order to regulate the tax, everyone will be forced to go through certain channels or certain server farms, certain attachment points, in order to connect to the greater net, so that they can be taxed. And once that is in place, then it's easy to control.
So you're talking about control through ancillary activities, but not actual technological control of the Internet.
Well, the Internet. The bottom line is, from my point of view, in order to control it, they have to break it up. Right now, I can sit here and I can talk to someone anywhere on the planet directly, because there's no stop gaps, no metering, no points of connect, if you will, that are individual to that particular connection. If it won't go via China, it can go via Korea. If it doesn't go via Korea, it can go via Australia. And the system is set up to do that automatically, to make that connection however it needs to be routed. But the first step any government control would do is to stop that and to have connections routed through a finite number of possibilities, and each one of which they'd be monitoring. Once they start that, then they can start controlling who can talk to who and when and where.
In any discussion, there are always pros and cons to each side of the issue. Art, I want to ask you, what are some of the reasons for regulating the Internet? Why should we regulate the Internet? How will it help our lives?
We're not. No one's regulating the Internet.
So what I'm saying, I'm not saying they are. I'm saying, what are the reasons to do so? What are some of the what kind of benefits could we get by a certain degree of regulation of the Internet? That's the question I'm asking. I'm looking for the pros, for the reason that we're even having a discussion about it, that it's not just a one-sided issue.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make sure that we're really clear about, at least on the U.S. side, what we're talking about. And there, unfortunately, has begun to have this meme rise up that the U.S. government is trying to regulate the Internet through the Federal Communications Commission. And that's not what's happening. So to the extent that we can talk about regulating normal telecommunications service, which we've regulated in this country for years, that we can talk about. But in terms of regulating the Internet as the sort of great wide web of servers and applications and everything else, we're not doing that.
Okay, but what I'm saying is there any aspect to, regulating basically, okay, you are with an organization that thinks that there are some benefits to certain controls being in place, and I'm trying to find out what those benefits are.
Oh, good. What we're in favor of is what has been done in this country for 70-some years, and that is that the telecommunications services, which connect people to the Internet, have been regulated for years to different degrees of control to protect consumers, and we're saying that that's the kind of thing that should continue. No one is talking about regulating Apple. No one is talking about regulating Amazon. No one's talking about regulating eBay, at least not through the FCC.
But you're saying
no one's talking about having the government take control over websites.
But you're saying that you're talking about that what is the status quo should continue. But this is this discussion is more about expanding the status quo, is it not? Is it not about having the FCC bring oversight to areas it previously did not have?
Well, it depends how you look at it. I mean, up until 5 years ago, the FCC did have that oversight. And in fact, when the Internet started and when it grew up and when it became the Internet that we have today, we had what was called then common carrier regulation. It was only in 2005 that the FCC did a little regulatory juggling and took away those consumer protections. So basically, what the radical change was what was done 5 years ago, and we're just trying to reverse that and get back to what had worked for years.
So why was it reversed in the first place if it was working well?
That's a real good question. I can't speak for the Bush era FCC. I think they thought that technologies would develop more than they have. Competition would develop more than it has. Their idea at the time was that consumers would have more choice, and that didn't pan out. So, and also, they sort of naturally would tend toward the position that the phone companies pitched. So those are probably some of the reasons. There were a lot of drawbacks to that approach, and the FCC now is having to go through all sorts of pretzel logic exercises to try and get back some of those protections, to try and get back some of those traditional ways of doing business that were thrown out. And that's why, yes, go ahead.
And what is it that FCC oversight brings to the benefit of the people and to the benefit of the Internet?
What it brings is a couple of things. What it brings to the benefit of Internet users is that we, the consumers, are in control of our Internet experience. That is how the Internet started. That is how you get couple guys in a dorm room, starting search engines, whether it's Yahoo or Google, whether it's a guy who wants to do an auction site, and the millions of other websites. It creates the environment of innovation without permission, where everyone has an equal chance to be heard, without interference from the middle.
And are you saying that without FCC oversight, we don't have that?
What I'm saying is that without FCC oversight, we don't have a way of dealing with problems when they do arise, because there is no authority in charge, no cop on the beat.
All right. Seton, how do you respond to that? Why shouldn't we regulate the Internet? I mean, Art has just made a reasonably good case, okay, for
No, he hasn't.
FCC. Okay, tell me.
No, he has not at all.
Tell me why not.